this on. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I have three subjects I'm going to talk about briefly today, and then, of course, I'm going to take your questions. First, I'm going to talk about COVID, then I'm going to talk about schools, and then I'm going to talk about violence in our community, and then we'll have questions. So today, starting with some of the numbers, yesterday we had 83 new cases reported in the city of St. Louis, and we had 2 deaths that were reported yesterday. The hospitalizations yesterday were 243. That's been a pretty consistent number over the last week and a half or so. 59 people in the ICU. Again, that's about the same as it's been for the last few days. 28 people again on ventilators, and 40 people yesterday, which really means 2 days ago, because these numbers are, the hospital admission numbers are 2 days behind, were 40 people. 38 people is the 7-day rolling average, and 48 people yesterday were discharged. So I always like to point out when there are more people discharged than were admitted. That's always a good sign. So far we have had 3,746 people discharged from the hospital. So we are taking a surgical approach, I'm calling it, in St. Louis to gain compliance from our businesses and from the customers and the people who visit those businesses. Several really excellent restaurant owners have contacted me through social media or just on the phone to say thank you for taking that surgical approach. We are just trying to save our business, trying to save our industry. And someone had something I thought which was a very good quote, and it said, "Safety is the new hospitality." And I think the vast majority of our restaurants are really taking your safety, their safety, and the safety of their workers very, very seriously, requiring masks, requiring social distancing, and encouraging outdoor dining when that's an option. And we encourage you to choose that also if it's an option to where you're going, because we know that COVID spreads less, is not as easily spread in outdoors than indoors. So I think it's heartening to see so many good restaurant owners, so many good business operators who care about themselves, who care about us, their customers, and who care about their workers. So thank you to all of them for doing that. And I get it. You were trying to save your businesses, save the jobs of your employees, and provide a good service to all of us who want to be able to dine out. So we know that when we look at these numbers, the highest increase in the number of cases is among young people. In the last month, about 1/3 of the new cases were among people in their 20s. Another 20-some% were among people in their 30s. So it's just really important. It seems like us older folks, we've gotten the message. We don't want to be exposed, don't want to catch COVID. And the younger folks are getting there because I know they don't want to spread it to their loved ones, their grandma, their mom, their dad, their coworkers who might have underlying health conditions. So let's keep going on that. Let's see here. I think that's it for strictly COVID today. Let me talk for a minute about schools. There's a big announcement late last night, early this morning from St. Louis Public Schools. And they, like all schools, all districts, have been really looking at the numbers, trying to make the best decision that they can for their students, for their teachers, and for their staff. And so this morning, St. Louis Public Schools, Kelvin Adams, Dr. Adams, announced that school would, this is provided the school board approves this plan. So I put that caveat in there, but the plan is for school to be delayed and not start on August the 24th, but rather to start on August the 31st, so a 1-week pushback. And that is so that teachers can be prepared for everybody to be doing virtual learning. Now, Dr. Adams, I just spoke with him a bit ago, and he said 65%, I believe was the number, 65% of his families have chosen the 100% virtual learning, so that's learning from home. The other 35% were leaning towards attending in-person school. And so what he is proposing is that everybody will be learning virtually, but school buildings will be open for instructional support centers. There will be small groups. The whole school won't be open, but rooms in the spaces in the buildings will be open in order to provide technical support to kids, to provide meals to kids, to provide supervision, to provide counseling, to provide just help with the lessons and with the homework. And so they will be open from, I don't think I wrote down the hours, but normal daytime hours. Buses will run for those kids who want to go to the instructional support centers, but they will still be learning virtually. Any child K through 8 will be provided or has been provided with an iPad. High school students will be provided with Dell laptop computers. Their technology needs are a little bit higher, of course. And the school system has 4,000 hotspots that are available for kids who are doing virtual learning from home, but who may not have internet access at home or good internet access from home. So I know there's a tremendous amount of anxiety around this whole school question. I've received many emails myself, as I think have anybody who is trying to make the decision about what is best for kids, what's best for staff, what's best for faculty. And so it's, the 29th of July now, so St. Louis Public Schools will start in a month with 100% virtual learning, but some students, 35% of the students, being able to visit the instructional support centers that are in the schools. Still virtual learning, though. So I think that is, just knowing that decision has been made and hopefully will be affirmed by the school board, is some relief to parents who are struggling to make the right decisions for their kids, and some relief to teachers who are struggling with the decision, who every teacher I know wants to help their students learn as much as possible, and we don't want this learning divide, educational divide, to be exacerbated by COVID. So everybody's been trying to make the right decision. I commend Dr. Adams for making this decision, for pushing school back a week so that teachers and everybody can have an extra week to get ready for this virtual learning. This is new for everyone, and it's so important because we can't have our kids get behind, because once you're behind, there's almost no catching up. Because if you're behind and you're catching up, the kids that are not behind, they're still moving forward. So there's still that gap, and we don't want that for our kids. So that is schools at St. Louis Public Schools. Some charter schools are doing some different things, and they're notifying parents. archdiocesan schools are doing some different things, and you know, quite honestly, it's a month away, at least till the end of August, and there are still decisions that are in process. So everybody's doing the best they can, though. So recognize that, please, as you struggle with these decisions yourself. Now, the third subject I want to talk about is violence in our city. And I've talked about this in some form or another almost every day. But today, this morning, the city of St. Louis had 150 homicides so far this year. That's up about 30%, over about a third more than last year at this time. And that is a crisis, of course, for those families affected and the friends of those folks that are affected, but it's a crisis for our city and all of us as well. It is not any consolation, but it is happening across the country in every major city. I think it is, there's a lot of stress right now. There's a lot of pain in our community. People are settling their differences with guns. And in our state, there are very few, hardly any gun regulations. Some of you know that we announced a couple of 3 weeks ago that we would be doing a public safety review of the police department, and that effort was being headed up by Commissioner Chuck Ramsey, who's a very well-known police chief across the country from Chicago, Philadelphia, many places, a very highly regarded individual. And I was on a call with him yesterday, I think it was maybe Monday afternoon, after we did Live with Lyda. I was on a call with him, and we were talking about this gun situation, and I said, well, you know, we have very lax gun laws here, and he says, you don't even have gun laws here. And it was a metaphor, not literally, but it certainly is part of the issue when you combine stress and pain and lax gun laws and drugs. All of that is related, and it is driving up violence in our cities, in our city of St. Louis and in cities across the country. There are a number of factors to that. You know that many folks, detainees, were released from jail because of the COVID crisis, and we believe that that's contributing somewhat to this violence. And when there is violence, it begets more violence because of retaliation. Another factor is that we're short police officers. I've talked about this so many times, but we are over 130 police officers short of our authorized strength. We, like many cities and many areas, are having a very difficult time hiring police officers. Many young folks don't want to be police officers. But I would just say this, that if you believe that the culture of policing needs to be improved, needs to change, the best way to change that culture is from the inside. So I would hope that there are some young people out there who say, I want to be a police officer. I can help change the culture of policing. So hiring police officers is difficult right now. We know that in St. Louis we have a residency requirement. We can only hire from the 62 square miles that are here in the city of St. Louis. There's nobody else in this entire region that has that sort of a requirement. So another department can hire from the city of St. Louis residents, but the city of St. Louis cannot hire from St. Louis County, not right now. We're working to change that. We're working at the state level to change that. It's part of the special session that was just gavelled in to the Senate on Monday, and they have taken a break, recessed, and they'll be back a week from today, the 5th of August. We are very hopeful that we will get that bill voted out of the Senate and then voted out of the House as well. There are several things in the bill. A couple of them are really good things. One is lifting residency. Another is providing more funding and more programs for witness protection, because we know that to solve crimes, we need to be able to protect witnesses. Those are two of the biggest things that we are very interested in making sure pass out of that bill. And then I guess finally I would just say that, you know, the escalating violence that we have today, and I said it earlier, is a result of stress and pain and gun laws, but it's also a result of decades, literally decades, of decisions that we as the big we here, we as a society have made about the funding of social service programs, about the funding of education, about the funding of mental health. All of those things, we, for decades, have been underfunded. And so this violence that we're experiencing is partly as a result of that. And so I often say that we all need to focus on both the prevention side of violence, social services, summer jobs for young people, recreation programs, workforce development. All those are on the prevention side, as well as being focused on the law enforcement side. Both are extremely important. So it's very distressing to have this number of homicides and this number of shootings in our city. St. Louis County has also seen an increase in their numbers, as have other cities. That doesn't make it any better. It's still our city here, and these are our residents and our folks who are, this violence will affect families for decades to come. So with that, covering those three subjects today, I bet we have some questions.
We have questions on all the topics you talked about, Mayor. First, starting with COVID-19. So we have a couple of questions about bars and restaurants. Jimmy's question has to do with the curfew that all bars and restaurants in the county now face, which is 10 p.m. as of Friday. Do you worry that people will then drive over Skinker and come into the city if our bars don't close at 10?
I think it's something to be considered, but whether you're closed, whether you have to close or not, those restaurants and bars that are able to stay open in the city still must practice social distancing and mask wearing. It's not debatable. It's not arguable. They have to. So they will have a more limited capacity because of the social distancing and the mask wearing requirement. And my point here is most of our restaurants are really doing a very good job, and they are doing their best to comply with the guidelines. So those guidelines won't change just because St. Louis County changes its rules. You know, there are no curfews in St. Charles County either, or Jefferson County, or Franklin County, so our surrounding counties either. So
You may have sort of answered this, but Claude's question is, do you anticipate any additional restrictions on some of our businesses, including bars and restaurants?
Claude, I don't rule it out. It's something that we're trying to avoid, but we know that we have to get these numbers down, and we know that we have to change behavior. So I'm not going to rule it out, but I will say that closing any business is not something I ever want to do, and restricting business is not something I ever want to do. But if we have to, we will, in order to get compliance.
Mayor, at the beginning you talked about the spike in cases of people between the ages of about 20 and 30, or 20 and 40. What is your message to young people who seem to have not gotten the same message that older people have earlier in the pandemic?
So, you know, it's interesting. I don't know if young people want to hear from somebody my age what I think they should do, but I know the young people that I know are very responsible folks. I have a couple of kids who are in that age group. One's 30, one's 27, and they are, and their friends are responsible folks, and frankly, you know, they don't want to be around their old mom because they want to make sure that I don't get COVID. So I know that young people are responsible. I know that young people care about their family members and their friends and their coworkers. And so I think it is just to try to reinforce the message of making sure that your behavior is not risky behavior, so that you don't contract COVID, so that you don't pass it along to someone else. Of course, we don't want you to get sick either. But so anyway, I appreciate the young people that are out there really doing the right thing, and most of them are.
Last COVID question, I think. Lindy asked, how many more or additional contact tracers so far has the city of St. Louis been able to bring on?
So Lindy, I don't know the exact number. I know that we were interviewing to bring on 15 folks. I don't know the exact number today. We've done that, and we've also expanded Qualtrics, which is the contact tracing software that we have been using. Let me say though, and I talked with Dr. Eccles about this just this week. Contact tracing is very difficult when you don't get the test result back in time. And that's not something we are in charge of. Most of the tests, PCR tests, the diagnostic tests, the one where they stick that really long Q-tip up your nose, it's been taking a week and a half, sometimes even a little bit longer to get those results back. So one of the things that I failed to mention earlier is that we are really encouraging people, if they possibly can, to self-quarantine between the time they have the test taken and the time they get the results back. Because if the results come back a week later and it's positive, and we then ask you to remember all the places you've been in the last week and all the people you've been in contact in the last week, that's very tough. We know that everybody can't do that. So it isn't a mandatory requirement. It's just saying, if you feel that you need to get a test to see if you're positive or not, please try as much as you can to limit your exposure to anyone else. I just had someone contact me this morning, and it had taken her relative about 6 days, I think, to get the results back. But within that 6 days, and she turned out to be, her relative turned out to be positive. But within that 6 days, they had had a family gathering of 20, 25 people. They had been in contact with many other people over that week. And so now they're scrambling to try to make sure that everyone that they were in contact with. So, you know, you really do need to keep your social gatherings, your personal social gatherings, small. You need to keep your group small, with just your immediate family or your close circle is the way I would describe that. So contact tracing is a challenge at the best of times. We know that LabCorp and Quest are way behind on processing the tests. You all know a month ago or 6 weeks ago, I was standing here saying to you, we don't have enough tests, we can't get tests. Well, the city of St. Louis, finally, we've gotten in over 300,000 tests. And so the federally qualified health centers and our medical providers are administering those tests. But then the next glitch is that the country has not had the processing capacity for these tests. You know, what we really need, and we're, you know, this is fingers crossed on this, there is a saliva test that is being tested. It's not ready for prime time yet. But that would be so helpful if you could have a test that you could do at home, that you could do, it was inexpensive, you could do it frequently, you could get instant or very quick results, and it was just a saliva test, you know. And so I think that's going to be very, very important. When we have that, And I think we will have it, but it's not ready yet. When we have that, I think it will significantly change the trajectory here if people are able to do their own tests. Because, you know, you can have a test today and tomorrow or the next day or on Saturday, you can be exposed. And that test is only good, the results of that test are only, what do I want to say, they're only right at the minute you had that test taken. So we need frequent testing and we need rapid responses.
Okay, questions about the other topics you talked about. Jean is watching and wanted to know if you can provide an update or a little bit of a timeline on the vacancy on the St. Louis School Board that you are charged with filling.
Hi, Jean. So there's one opening. A woman who was elected last year to the school board has had to go out of town. And I'm in the process of interviewing people. I've interviewed maybe 5 or 6 people. I think it's a really important spot. And so we're trying to make that decision now. And we still do, I still am certainly open to interviewing anyone else who thinks that they have the skill set to bring to the St. Louis School Board.
Tracy's watching. Her question has to do with how the city and SLPS are working to provide students who may not have access to the computers or hotspots or various technology that will be needed to accomplish online school.
So SLPS has this mostly covered through their own funding, but also the business community has stepped in to help with this because obviously everybody needs internet access now. And not only do you need the internet access, you need to have somebody there to help you when, you know, it doesn't work. How many of you have been in that? I've been in that situation myself, and, you know, I have Kyle who works here, and when something doesn't work, I'm calling out Kyle, but when something doesn't work, I say, Kyle, what's wrong with this? So people need not just the hardware, not just the access, but they also need the help. So we understand that. We are working with St. Louis Public Schools and charter schools for all kids and to be able to have access. And, you know, it's not just for schooling. I mean, how about telehealth or telemedicine? You know, you can now see your doctor for some things, not everything, but for some things over the internet. Searching for a job over the internet. So, you know, this is maybe a little more than the question you asked, but, you know, I'd like to see internet access be considered a public utility, just like access to electricity or gasoline, not gasoline, you know, gas, natural gas, water, sewer. Now, we have to pay for all those things, I understand that, but we need to have that access really built out into all areas. And there's been a lot written about the rural urban divide in terms of internet access, and it's true that much of rural Missouri and rural parts of our country do not have fast or do not have broadband, but there are parts of our city also where many families don't have access to the internet.
So on public safety, which was the other topic you talked about, so we had a couple of folks, Jim, Gwen, write in about the residency requirement, asking if the measure in Jefferson City will lift this for all civil and city employees beyond public safety.
So the bill that's in Jeff City right now will lift it for police, fire, and EMS. So no, not for all city employees. And that's kind of a whole nother subject. I think our neighborhoods are great neighborhoods and that people want to live here, but we're trying to change something that's been ingrained for a very long time. But if you think about it, police officers have to live in the city, firefighters have to live in for 7 years. We can only recruit from the city, but school teachers don't have to live in the city. You know, other government or quasi-government folks don't have to live in the jurisdiction that they work in. And it doesn't mean that they care any less about where they work, or the people where they work. So the bill that's before the Senate in Jeff City is just for police, fire, and EMS, public safety officers.
A few more questions before we have to go. Another question from Lindy Mayer, asking if the city of St. Louis right now is being considered to receive National Guard troops to come in to help address violent crime.
So, not National Guard troops that I'm aware of, but, and I don't know if you're asking me about the Portland situation or what exactly, but we have, our police department has a very good partnership with a lot of our federal partners, FBI, ATF, DEA, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Attorney. I'm probably missing someone there. And we work together all the time with those agencies to fight crime. We would be happy to have more of that collaborative partnership in order to help. You know, when you think about our police department being 130 officers short, we have 6 districts. So that is, if we had 20 or 25 more officers in every single district, that could make a real difference. Because our officers, frankly, are, they're getting worn out. You know, they, on the June 1st was the worst day. Chief Hayden, I've heard him say this many times, the worst day in his 33-year law enforcement service. And that was the day that 4 police officers were shot in a large uprising here in downtown. It was also the day that a retired police captain was shot. And was killed, yes, I'm sorry. 4 police officers shot, retired police captain killed, shot and killed. And, you know, so with that and with the running from calls to calls with all the violence that we're having in our city and managing protests, many protests on top of, I mean, our officers are they haven't told me this themselves, but they've got to be tired. And having 20 more officers in every district or 25 more officers in every district would make a big difference. So we welcome our federal partners to help us, collaborate with us, and work with us on fighting violence.
All right, last 2 questions, Mayor, on public safety before we have to go. So Chris is writing in about some of the public safety issues related to downtown and the riverfront late at night, fireworks, gunshots, cruising, partying. What is the city doing, or what are police doing to try and tamp down on that?
So police are doing good old-fashioned law enforcement. In addition to that, we have an overtime detail, I'll call it, which is working Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights on the riverfront. And that's 9 officers, 4 two-man cars and a sergeant that are working on the riverfront. So the riverfront is Lenore K. Sullivan, it's the Landing, it's the Lumiere area, in order to prevent some of that bad behavior. We have also placed barriers along what I would call the shoulder of the road there on the riverfront, so it's not so convenient for people to gather. We've made some, narrowed down some lanes on Market Street again, so it's not so easy for folks to gather. This past weekend, you probably know that there were 4 officers who were fired upon. 1 officer was hit as they were trying to address a cruising and a gathering situation on 13th Street, just a tad north of downtown here. So, you know, addressing it through police work, we know that there have been some cruising, there's some racing issues on 4th Street and on Broadway, and we've made some narrowing the streets in some parts, and law enforcement, we've made arrests, we've towed cars, we will make more arrests and tow more cars. So, you know, our police department's working very hard on all that. We do understand it's an unacceptable behavior. Washington Avenue, I didn't mention that, same kind of a situation. So we are working hard to make those arrests and to bring that behavior in line.
Okay, last question before we have to go. Jeff, who is watching, Mayor asks, what are some things that regular citizens in the city can do to help the city address crime? Are there various boards, commissions, or things that people can volunteer to do?
That's a good question. I should think of a more thorough answer for that for next time, but just, you know, off the top of my head, I mean, good citizens reporting things that they see that are out of line is always important. If you observe something, being willing to talk with the police about it, being willing to tell what you have seen so that arrests can be made and charges can be filed is very important. I think right now, I mean, those are the most important things. Police can't do this all. It takes a relationship with the community, and it takes the community to be willing to step up and prosecute, to step up and let people know what they've seen. If you've seen something that you don't want to talk to the police about, please call Crime Stoppers. That's completely anonymous, but that's really helpful to our police officers.
That's it for today, what we have time for.
Thank you all. Appreciate you being with us today, and we'll be back with you on Friday. Thanks.